everybody, Steffi here from The Makers, and hopefully you're all waiting in total anticipation to make a Hannes and Hannah doll today. And I know some of you have got are ready with all the materials and ready to sew and ready to make heads and ready to create tiny little memorable treasures forever. And some of you might just watch for the fun of it. Some of you might need to get the materials. Some of you might have completely different materials. So in any case, I will be as clear as I possibly can, so that whether you watch it now or you watch it later or you watch it again, you will be able to make one of these two dolls. And of course, it's all based on, this way around, making soft dolls. And the two dolls are in the book as well. I will refer to pieces in the book, but you don't necessarily need the book, but you do need the templates and the measurements. And those of you who've bought it from us, you have all of that at the ready, and it comes in 3 parts. Today is part number 1, and then we have a part number 2, which I will be live streaming tomorrow. That's Thursday, not Friday as originally advertised. And then there will be a weekend in between, and we have part number 3 to finish the doll off, and that will be on Monday. If you're watching this later on, none of this will make any sense. Just know that there are 3 parts, and I would try to sort of aim it at about 1 hour long, but it might overrun slightly. We'll see. Anyway, let's just see who's here. I can obviously watch this on my live streams, and so we've got well, at least 9 people watching, which is great, because there should be 9 packs that we've sent out. So hopefully everybody is here. Hi Jane, definitely Jane has got one. Hi Chris, Chris has one. Jana has got one. Thought I'd have a little look at doll making with you. Oh, that's nice, Diane. Donna definitely has got one. Kathy has got one with your cuppa. I've got my cuppa at the ready as well. There it is. It's a steaming hot peppermint tea, and I've even got another one on the go. This is my tea from earlier, so that will be nice to drink too. It's actually, I think it will be Emma here today. Sophie is still, yeah, you must all think Sophie's disappeared, but Sophie's actually frantically packing, and we are down on site by 3 people. We've got 1 member of staff back tomorrow, so it'd be nice to have her back, and she can like literally launch into it all. But at the moment, I've done, for the last 2 days, I've done nothing but packing, so that's why I've been quiet on social media if you've been missing me. Who else is here? Hi Alex, and we are missing a few people who have got the pack, but as this is something that will stay on YouTube, it's great that we can have this anytime. And the other thing that I would like to do is, Emma, I'm putting you to the test now. Could you please message Sophie to bring down Edwina doll, please? I could do it, but then I have to look at my phone and doing it. And oh yes, the other thing you might have noticed, I've changed this room. I needed to shift from needle felting to doll making, so I thought, what better way than to rearrange the room and yeah, just have a fresh start. It also gave me an opportunity to tidy up, because my desk, in all fairness, was a complete mess, and it probably will be messy after the doll again, but for now it's nice and tidy. So we will keep the chat going, and then what I also thought is that maybe you could send me photos at the end of whenever you've got to the next stage, before the next tutorials, and then I can show the photos. I've got to work out how to do that yet, but I've got 24 hours at least to do this. I will show the photos here on screen if you want that, of course. If you don't want that, then that's fine too, and then we can all see what stage we're at. Also remember, we do have a Facebook group that's actually called Making Soft Dolls. It'd be lovely if you could share your first stage of the doll on there as well. I will be going really slowly, so don't panic. Today we're just making the head, as you all know. So in your pack, first of all, you've been given 2 lots of white wool, and there is a smaller quantity and a larger quantity. The larger quantity, which is 50 grams, is for stuffing the body. You can put that to one side. That's something for much later date. all you need is the smaller quantity, which is the lanolin rich core wool. Pull that one out. The next thing you will have had is, I'm just getting my very useful sewing box out as well. There. It's got all kinds of bits and pieces in it. I love it. I just love it so much, having these things at the ready for decorations. None of this you'll need, of course, but it's here for me. It's a bit like a comfort blanket, knowing that it's there. So I'm going to put that here. I have already got my sewing needles here, and a couple of pins as well. We don't need them today, but they might come in handy during the next few sessions. And I've got my extra long doll needle, which you also actually don't really need. But if you are interested in this kind of stuff, we obviously sell all these items on our website as well. So I've got to lean down because I need to grab my stockinette piece. You will need this. This is the skin color of the doll that I'm making. You who have got packs from us have got neither of this color. You either have got the paler skin for the red doll, or this lovely olive color skin for the blue doll. Mine is more like a I don't know, we call it cocoa, I think. It's such a beautiful color, just absolutely love it. So anyway, this is gonna be my doll with that color skin. And you will also need something that we've sent out, which looks a bit like that. It's a white cotton tube, and you'll definitely need that. And you will also need today one lot of the, in fact, both lots of the extra strong thread that we have sent. You might have this as two bundles, or you might have this as one continuous thread. You will also need some scissors, which I have got here at the handy as well. And that's it. You just need to have strong hands to tie the knot. And then I will show you also, because you've got two options. You can either make a very plain face. So it doesn't mean to say that even though the face is plain, it's really round, literally like a ball. You can still have eyes and a mouth on there, but it's a different shape face compared to this one. If you look really close up, can you see that this one has sort of a little eye line in there? And that's a different shape face, so you can make either of them, and you can decide while we're doing this which one you prefer. This one is a little bit more complicated, but it's not that difficult, and once you know how to do it, then you can do it in the future. This one is a lot simpler because you don't have to use that extra length of extra strong thread to tie an eye line. So I will go through all of this step by step, but these are the two options you've got today, and I will mark them very clearly at which point you've got to decide one or the other. But for now, we're all doing exactly the same. If there are any questions at any point, I keep looking at the screen to see what your comments are. The first thing is, I don't want you to panic. I've actually had total panicky moments in the night, not because I don't know what I'm doing. It's just that I haven't I'm normally needle felting, I'm not doll making, so I haven't had any feedback yet how clear I come across, or how much I take everything for granted and I'm not explaining it properly. So I'm doing my very, very, very best to keep you all completely on that same on the same level as everybody else. So is anyone here trying doll making or even sewing for the first time today? Oh, hi Chris, you are today. That's great. It's really, really easy. But I know you're also a very crafty person, so I'm not worried about you being able to do this at all. And Elizabeth is there. Hi everyone, I'm looking forward to learning more about making soft dolls and other tips. Great, you're in the right place, definitely today. And Chris has been reading the book, and this is attempting. Yeah, but it would be absolutely great. We all have to start at the beginning, and I'm just gonna, now I'm worrying that yes, no, I'm definitely, you can all hear me, can't you? It's a bit blowy in the garden, maybe not such a good decision. Can everybody hear me? Just want to make sure that I'm actually here, because Emma just said Steffi will be with us shortly. Very busy Bucket HQ at the moment. Okay, you need to let me know that I'm here. Otherwise, I'm just talking to myself, and that's not good. Not good. So I'm just waiting to find out whether actually anybody can hear me and whether anybody can see me. I can see myself, but I don't know if everybody else is on board here. It's a bit blowy in the garden, maybe not such a good decision. Yes, I can. Excellent. I knew you should normally ask that question right at the very beginning. And when Emma said, oh, Steffi will be with us very shortly, I thought, oh, am I not here? But I am. That's great. So you haven't missed anything, I'm guessing. Excellent. So Emma, did you hear that little message that I passed to you about Edwin doll? If you have, then maybe you could just ask Sophie to drop her in for me. And maybe Sophie can come and say hello. So just to prove she does exist still. Right, so first of all, we're starting with this bigger, no, it's the smaller part of the white wools that you have, you've got. It's 25 grams, in fact. There's a bit hanging off there, but that's fine. And what you need to do is, first of all, and I'm going to go a little bit smaller now, so you can just see my hands and what I'm doing. Move this out of the way as well. You need to roll this bit of wool into a tight ball, and this is not so dissimilar than what you might be doing when you're needle felting and you're making a basic shape. So you need to roll this in, and what I do is I'll pull the ends out so I can make a nice neat little shape. The tighter you make this, the tighter the head will be. So if you're making it, and we really do want a tight head. What does help, if you are a needle felter, it does help to just sort of literally stab it at the very end, so you can keep your hands free. And my shape is now about that size, so if I squeeze it really tight, there's a bit of give in there still, but it's a nice neat ball. And then you can use, if you've got scraps like I have, you can sort of fold them over the top as well and tighten them down really quick like that. Fold them in. You don't have to use all of this. If you want a doll with a slightly smaller head, then don't go crazy on this wool. So I'm actually keeping it like that. So because you're using the lanolin ridge, you should actually be able to let go of the ball. It is such a sticky wool in a nice way that the wool will actually contain itself quite well. If you can do this, then put it down to one side. And next you will need this tube here. And if you open that tube up, you can see there's a massive stretch in there. So what looks really quite slim, you can actually broaden out into quite a big shape here. And it's a little bit like putting your sock on, except you're putting it over a round shape. And all you need to do is make sure that you have got sort of about that much at the end, maybe a little bit less. So just push the ball down a little bit. So it's a bit like squeezing a sausage out of the skin, so that you have a bit less of this tube at the bottom. And then what you do is, I'll wait until everybody has got this. So I'm a little bit quiet today, okay? Well, I can speak up a bit, but it might be that I have moved things around and I'm a bit further away from the mic. Yeah, sorry, maybe can you turn me up at your end a little bit? Maybe Emma meant Sophie. Oh, I see. Okay, whatever. So if you've all got as far as this, then what you're going to do now is you're going to twist the top part so that you're closing this off, and then you're going to go over this whole shape again by, I've got probably a longer piece than you have, by putting the shape over it again. So now you've got a double layer and the top is closed. I trapped a little bit of wool in there, but that it doesn't matter. I'm just going to ignore that. So now you've got a nice round shape here. that has got a double layer of this tubing on it, and all you need to do now is you're going to tie that bottom part off, and for this you will need your extra strong string. This is I still haven't managed to put this onto our website, but this string is so strong, I dare you try and tear it with your fingers. It really isn't tearing, and that's really good for doll making, because the last thing you want is a string tearing. And now you tie this around the base, go around it a couple of times, and then what you do is you just literally put a slip knot, no, that's not what it's called, just a knot on there to tie it off. So you're tying it at the end just with that string, and then what you do is you cut it off. You don't need that anymore. There, gone. And if you've got a massive big end here, I didn't measure mine when I got it ready this morning, just cut the end off. So you've got about a couple of inches at the end here. That's all we need. And so it looks a little bit like a balloon now, the head. You've got the bits at the bottom, and then you've got a round shape. I've trapped a bit of wool in my top, but it doesn't really matter. It's not, nobody's going to see that. I'll just ignore that in a minute. So now you've got a nice head here. Okay. So the next thing you need to do is, and we need to, oh, there's my doll coming. Thank you. Sorry, I will show you Edwina later. But the next thing you need to do is you need to decide now whether you're going to have a round moon face like this one there. I have got another doll that I can show you that has a similar face. So just to give you an idea that you can actually embellish the head. So sorry, it's a bit bendy, that doll. That's just a very simple head. It's slightly bigger, but you can put a face onto it. That's now your choice, whatever you want to do. Or you can give it more of a shaped face, so that the face itself has got a slight dent in here where we're going to tie the eyeline. It's entirely up to you. I will show you how to tie the eyeline, and you might decide that's way too complicated, or you're just going to stick with a simple face. In any case, this is the step that you do if you are tying the eyeline. So I'm just going to cut another piece of that extra strong thread. It needs to go round the head twice, and to do this you lay it onto the doll like this. I'm actually going to come a little bit closer even, because then you can see it even better. Right, so you've got your thread here. You lay it onto the doll, have about the same ends at either end, and then you go around the doll once, and you're going around the doll again, and these threads, they go parallel. What you're not doing is you're not twisting it to go around. That's not what you're doing. You have to go around it by going around it again exactly the same way. And now the tricky bit is, and that's the only tricky bit I promise you about this face, is that you have to get it as tight as you can, so that it's about, yeah, it's just really tightly tied here. And then you can go through. The way to keep it tight is by going by putting a knot onto it, by going around it once and twice, and that way when you tighten it, it stays tight. It doesn't come open before you have a chance to put a knot onto it. So that is, and then you're halfway there from tying the eyeline, and you can see that the thread that I've tied around it is actually running parallel to each other here. So they're not, there is no twist in them, and whatever is here at the front looks like that. So they're coming off at both ends, and that is how you you do the first step of tying an eyeline. I'm just going to wait until people have caught up, and until I've heard how is everybody going. Let's just see. so you're probably all really busy doing this, so I'm not getting much feedback here at the moment, but that's fine. I can also show you this again. I'm just going to cut this eye line and I'm going to do it again, just so that I can show you the step again. So you've got your head here. It's a double layer head. The wool's inside, nice solid ball. And you're going to take it's about 50 centimeter long, this strand, and you're putting it onto the center of that ball of the head. You're going around, and then you're going straight around again, so you're not crossing it over. Don't do that, not like when you're wrapping a parcel. You're keeping it nice and tight if you can, and go straight around again. So now you've gone round it twice, and then you put a knot onto there. But first of all, you just go as if you're tying a knot, and you go round it once, and then you're going round it again. And now when you hold it really tight, it will hold itself. It doesn't come open because you've gone round the string twice, and then you can put your knot on top once you've done that. There we go. So that is the head tied, the first step anyway, and you will see in a minute why we do need it to be nice and tied. Now the second time round I have actually not gone quite in the center, so I'm just going to try and move this up a little bit. If all fails, I can always take it off and show you again, but that it doesn't matter if it's not entirely in the center. It just adds character to the doll. So now you've got 2 threads left, 2 ends, and now you will need a sewing needle. So you're threading one end first onto your sewing needle, and then where the front is, and this is going to be the front of the face. So if you feel this is not the best part, then you can, before you put a needle onto that, you can pull the whole thing round the head and find a better place if that is what you want to do, or just stick with it. And I will actually tie this eyeline a 3rd time to bring it more into the center again. So if you're still struggling to do this, or if you need to see it another time, here comes the 3rd time. Got my string, put it in the middle of the head, go round it once and twice, making sure that I am not twisting this thread. It's just literally running parallel, putting a double slip onto the onto that thread, and then tightening it, and then it gives me time to put a knot on the top like that. And now I've got my 2 ends here, and I'm going to put the thread onto the needle. And now I'm going, if this is the middle where the 2 threads are coming off there, I'm literally going a 1/4 around, and now I'm going to sew in the end of this thread by catching the eye line. I'm just holding it as close as I can to the camera. So I'm tidying this thread away, but what I'm doing is I'm also trapping this thread by going round it and at the same time fastening the eye line into place. Nearly said timeline. That's of course not what it is. So I am trapping it so that it can't slip up and down anymore. I'm literally trapping it. And then to get rid of that thread, I'm actually just going to push it all the way through to the other side there, and cut it off. If you've got a long enough piece, you could even go around that side now, but we're going to do this now with the other one. So that's now being fastened in around the eye line. So you have, this is the middle where the knot is there, and you're just going 1/4 to one side where you imagine the ear to be. If you imagine that the knot on front of the face is the nose, then just go round that eye line so that you're trapping it. It can't move up and it can't move down. Just a couple of times just to secure it, and then you are going all the way back through the head to get rid of that thread to the other side. and then cut it off. There we go. So now what we've done is, this is the second step to do the eyeline properly. Now you've got your knot here still in the middle. You've got on one side the eyeline cord by sewing it, and you've got it on the other side as well. So I've got my, where I imagine the ears to be here on the side, and then that's where the nose is, where the original knot was. How is that? How is everybody doing with that? Is anybody doing this while I'm doing it? Because that would be really, it would be really good to find out if that is working for all of you. So I'm not getting any, I haven't seen any comments. I can, like I said, I can only assume that you're all working really hard to do this. So Donna, you're asking, it looks about halfway, is it? I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Yes is always good. I don't know what you're saying yes to, but yes is good. I'm just going to go a little bit bigger now. So here's the head. I've tied the eyeline. If you're not tying the eyeline, then you're not doing any of this. You're just watching this and having a cup of tea while I'm doing that. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to pull the back. So the back is the opposite end of where the knot is. That's where the original knot is, and the back is at the opposite end. We're going to pull the back up. So we're splitting, and I'm going to go small again. Close-up demo, here we go. So this is the back where the two strands of the eyeline are running next to each other. And now we're going to split these in half so that one wriggles its way upwards. And for this, you could do with a crochet hook, which I haven't got here at the moment, but maybe somebody could bring me one in. Oh my goodness, I'm so disorganized. So, so basically, one, you're wriggling downwards, and I'll show you this with a crochet hook as well. So this is where you really need a strong thread. If you haven't got a strong thread, you will curse, because it will, at this point, it will tear, because there's so much pressure on it. But what I'm doing is I'm now separating these two parallel eyeline threads, so that one wriggles its way down towards the bottom knot of that tube there. So you've got one has gone down, and then the other one I'm going to try and get to the top. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I need the back of the head. I don't want, on the back of the head, I don't want a line. The back of the head needs to be nice and round. So I'm just going to wait for my crochet hook. But this is halfway done now, and this is the front. So it needs to be split at the back of the head. And it is a little bit of a jiggly, miggly thing to do. But eventually you can squish all that excess part of the head through that thread. So the thread comes up, and the rest of the head gets squished down, and then you end up with a nice round head. And I'm actually amazed that I can do this without a crochet hook, but it's obviously possible. So by the time the crochet hook comes, I will have done this. So you have to get this thread all the way to the top of the head. Once you're committed, you're going to have to go and do it. Otherwise, it looks even weirder, the shape at the back of the head. So there's my crochet hook coming now. God, hopefully this is it now. So I'm using the crochet hook now, which makes it a heck of a lot easier. You do manhandle this quite a bit, so don't feel you know, this is completely normal. And I'm wriggling this end of the that last bit all the way up. So now I have got, it's got a tuft of hair here. Pull this out. There. So now what I've still got the front. That's where the knot is, the original knot that we've tied, which is almost like the nose marker. I have sewn one end into the side of the head and the other end into the other side of the head. And now I've separated the two parallel running eyeline threads, so that one's now meeting that base knot, and the other one sits right on top of the head. It can't slip over the front of the head because it's sort of just before we twisted that tube to put it over the head twice. So now I have got a head with an eye line and the back of the head. This is basically the 3 steps of how to tie an eye line on a doll. How is everybody? Oh no! Oh, Jane hasn't got the kit yet, but that's okay, Jane. You can work. You can work with this. So I think Donna means is the eye line halfway down the face. Yeah, the original eye line gets tied around the center of the face. This is what you did. And if you remember, and I'm really happy to repeat this whole process again because we have the time to do it. So you've got your wool. You tie this as tight as you can into a ball. Might not have enough gauze. In fact, I don't have any gauze now, but that's okay. We can improvise. So this is what you've done. You have tied your wool into a tight ball by rolling it in on itself. There's actually a bit too much wool there. I didn't weigh that very well. And so you've got your ball of wool that hopefully will stay that shape because you've got that lovely lanolin rich wool and it holds its own shape quite easily. And I think what I might do is I might just cut the whole of this eye line again and start over so that I can show it to you again as a second as a repeat. So I'm just going to undo everything I have just done. I'm not even going to show you, so you won't know any the better. Just pretend this hasn't happened. And I'm getting there. I've done this quite well actually. It's quite hard to undo it, which is good. That's exactly what it's meant to be, because that's a really important step in the doll making. And when you're making dolls, you really want them to be absolutely solid and really well made. So I've got my head here again as it was before I tied the eye line. Just give it a bit of a squish. I've now put the tube over it twice, in fact. So I've pushed it on like I put a pair of socks on, twisted the top, pulled it back down again, and then tied it at the bottom. Okay, that's all I've done so far. And then you take your extra strong thread and you're going to tie an eye line. And the way to do that is by tying the thread around the center of that ball, and then you're going round it twice, but you are not going to twist the thread at all. You just keep it running side by side until you get back to the front, and then at the front you're going to put a knot onto there, and to help you make that a really strong line, like a really like a dent in that head, you're going to go round that original thread twice, because that will help you to keep the tension whilst you're pulling, and it doesn't just pop open, because now you're going to have to let go in a minute. So I'm tying this nice and tight, and now I'm going to put a knot onto it so that I close it off basically. Okay, that's secure now. So I've got 2 threads hanging off the side now. Imagine that this, where the knot is the nose, and now I'm going to one side with the thread, threading it into a needle so I can sew about a quarter along where I imagine the ear to be, and I'm going to trap that double eyeline thread by sewing into it from both sides. So I'm going around the thread and sewing into the fabric. Just 2 or 3 times will do, just to put it into place so it can't slip. That part of the eyeline cannot slip anymore now because you fastened it. Then I'm going all the way across the head. If you've got a long enough needle, you don't have to do this. You can just tidy away the thread into the other side, and I'm just going to cut it so it's out of the way. Now I'm repeating this with the other end of the thread. by going to the opposite side. So this is the side where I've just come out with the thread, and I'm also fastening the eye line into the side of the head by going round it with my sewing needle, sewing it tight into place so it cannot slip off the head anymore. There we go. Just a few times, then I go all the way back through the head and get rid of that end too. Now I have the knot in the middle tied. The eye line is being secured to one side of the head and secured to the other side of the head. And now what I need to do is I need to split the eye line at the back of the head. So for this, it really helps to have a crochet hook where you can gently wriggle your way down the bottom of the head. This got nothing to do with crocheting. This is just that you have a leverage on that extra strong thread. And this is always the test for the extra strong threads, whether they're actually extra strong. And then I do the same with the second half of that thread and going all the way to the top of the head. Should your thread break, it's not the end of the world. You just start with tying the eye line again. It's annoying, but it's not, hasn't spoiled anything. What you can see here at the back is the bit that I sewed earlier, so ignore that bit at the moment. So now I have got my face with a dent. I've got the sides that I've sewn in, that's solid, that eye line doesn't move, and I've got the back of the head that's very even, except it's got a bit of thread in there from my first attempt to show you how to sew, how to make the eye line, so ignore that bit for now. So this is what my head looks like now. If you're making a plain head without the eye line, you will have done none of that. So you're just basically watching for the fun of it. The next thing you are going to do is you're going to, for starters, you can check what your little face looks like now. This is the fun bit. So I'm going to explain this stockinette or jersey or tricot. There are lots of words for it. What you have got is the light quality of it, and if you look at it, it's a little bit like a stocking stitch, so it looks the same from the front as it looks from the back, which means it's the more stretchier of the two varieties that you can get, which is great for faces. And if you give it a bit of a stretch, you can see you have to stretch it so that the stitch runs down, so you'll see automatically which part stretches easier, so that way it stretches much more easy than that way. And we want the stretch to run side by side, from side to side, and just for the fun of it, just push it over the face to get an idea of what your little face will look like. So you've got the eye line looks really lovely here, and that's basically what the face will look like. If you want to make a nose, it's not strictly speaking on the offer here, but if you did want to make a nose, you could use a little bit of the white wool and turn it into a tight little ball and roll it really tightly into a ball. Some people use beads and sew it to the front of the face. I don't like it because the bead eventually will wrap the fabric, and then you have an exposed bead, and if you're making a doll for a small child, you really don't want a bead to be exposed. Then you can lay this ball that you've just made literally on top of the original knot of the eye line, which we always said looks a bit like the nose. And then you can use a thread, preferably the extra strong thread, or any thread to be honest, and just sew that bit on. So if you want to make a nose, you can do that by sewing that ball of wool on there. It doesn't really matter whether it looks neat or not, as long as it's on there and it looks even, so you don't have like it's not in the center or anything like this. Just sew it on there any old way. It's not felted, it's just rolled as you rolled it, and I'm sewing it on. And whilst I'm sewing it on, I'm sort of tucking in some of the wispy ends of the wool. So you might want to go through the nose a couple of times, just sew it on. It just needs to be a little feature on top of the face, bang on in that eye line where you've made the original knot, and sew that into place. This is just an extra feature if you want to do it. Neither of the dolls have got a nose, that neither Hannes nor Hannah have got a nose, so you don't need that really if you don't want it. So I'm just going round it and sewing it on. There are lots of other ways of how you can sculpt the face. So in the book, the Making Soft Dolls book, there's also an option to needle felt the face. So if you are a needle felter, then that might be something that comes naturally to you. So I've just sewn this bit of nose on, and I'm literally just cutting the thread. And the nice thing is to always check with your stockinette before you sew the stockinette how it looks now with the nose on. So suddenly you can see the features are emerging. So from the profile you can see now it's got a little nose, and it's very exciting to see this happening. So even though it looks absolutely hideous this way, as soon as you put the skin colored fabric over the top and you give it a stretch, you can see the very basic plain features coming through. So this is also a good indication of how much fabric you need to use now. So if you give this a really good stretch and you want to see at the back how much you need to stretch it, you can sort of gauge how much of the fabric you will have left over, and you can cut off. You have a generous proportion of fabric here. So what I want you to do now is to just mark it, either remember where it is or mark it with a pen where you need to cut the fabric to make a really tight stretch over the head. We don't want this floppy or loose. We want this as tight as it possibly goes. And give yourself about 1 centimeter of seam allowance. So when you're sewing it, you just need to be able to pinch it enough to because we're sewing this tube separately, and that is the next step. So whether you have made a head that has a nose and an eyeline, or whether you've just made the plain head. So for those who haven't added an eyeline into it, make sure that you now follow the next step. So I've got my piece of fabric here. I should also just say, and I've got this one left, and this will come in handy to make little hands later. So I'm going to put this to one side, and this is the bit that I'm going to sew now into a tube. What I was going to say is, and I'm just going to go a little bit bigger again here. I'm not a sewer, so sewing for me is quite an alien thing. I don't use a sewing machine. I love doing hand sewing, but I'm not a precision person. So if any of this freaks you because you are maybe you've done quilts and you're really precise, I do apologize. I just don't work like that. So the whole book is pretty much on gauging what you need to do, checking against what you're doing. It's not because your head might be slightly bigger, so there's no point saying cut exactly that piece and sew it and that will be that fits every doll. It won't, because you might have tightened it, rolled a tighter ball. Your head might be longer rather than round. Everybody makes different shape heads. You'll find that you somehow find your own style completely unintentional. I've seen people who they can't help it, but they always make really round faces, and some people they make long faces, and sometimes when you look at them, they've also got long faces. So it's really nice to just let emerge whatever emerges. But in any case, I've cut my fabric piece to size now, and all I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew my thread my needle, and I'm going to sew along the back with a 1 centimeter seam allowance a back stitch, and I'll show you how a back stitch works. I'm just going to get a smaller sewing needle out of my little stash here. It's not in there. I've got so many felting needles, it's actually a bit I didn't bring that sewing needle here now. It's fine. I'm just going to, oh yeah, no, I have got them here. There we go. So I'm just going to use the thread. This is the thread that you have all been given. So you can use this now, which is sort of a pale color, but it works for all the skin tones. Plus the fact you're not going to see that seam at all, because it's going to be entirely covered. So what you can't see on the doll is the back of it, which is what we're working on right now by making that piece of fabric fit the face. So whether it is the doll that has got the round face, or whether you have got a featured face, whether you've got a nose or no nose, this is for everybody is the same thing. You will have literally custom measured that piece of skin colored stockinette by shaping it around the head, cutting enough off so that you can make a nice snug fit. It needs to be really, really tight. So thread your sewing needle. I use a double sewing thread, and then you're going to start sewing this piece of fabric together. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm just checking a few of the I wanted to see if I could manage the process before I ordered a kit. You know what I'm like, forgetting in a muddle, really finding your instructions easy to follow. Oh, Jane, you can do it. It's so easy. You don't need any knowledge. You just need to know how to sew by hand. And I explain the different stitches if you're not sure. But even if you do a different one, it's not the end of the world. Just do the stitch that you can. Oh no, Chris, yours broke. Oh, have you caught up with us again? Yes, it's also worth saying, if you're using a crochet hook that's not entirely smooth in that bend, it kind of eventually will tear the thread. It's a bit like sewing it, but so it needs to be a really smooth crochet hook as well. I'm not saying yours wasn't, but that's worth mentioning. So if you have managed to get the eye line, if you haven't, then maybe just do one without for now, because there is another chance of making one with an eye line. But for now, all you're going to do is, and that's all I'm going to do, and I'll come a lot closer so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm literally sewing this piece of fabric now into a tube. And the good thing is that there's no inside or outside, so it doesn't matter which way around you're doing it. And all I'm doing is I'm just allowing sort of at least a centimeter, but it could, yeah, I'm actually going a little bit smaller. So I ought to have a centimeter of seam allowance. And I'm starting to sew, just cutting the ends off here so it doesn't look like my thread is going loopy. And all I'm doing is a back stitch is when you go back and then you go two forward. So you go one back. So where this thread comes out now is where I'm going to put the needle in next. So I'm going now into the stitch, and from the side that I'm looking at, it will look neat, and from the other side it will look like you've always skipped a stitch. So I'll keep going a little bit longer before I can show you the other side. So I'm making really small, neat stitches because I want this to be really strong. Remember, we're putting this so that it can fit really snug onto the head. When I made my very first doll, I didn't even do as complicated a head as this. So for you to do your first doll and do a head and jump straight in with both feet, you're doing really well. I just made the simplest head, which is also featured in the book, but admittedly it looks quite different. I'll show you the difference. If you're making a very simple head, you literally just put the ball of wool inside this stockinette fabric, but then you end up with these creases around the neck, and that's the only reason why we are doing like a double layered head with the gauze, the cotton tube, and that avoids that. But this was the style of my very first doll that I made for my then 2-year-old daughter, and she absolutely loved it. This is not a beauty competition. This is about making the doll and enjoying it. So I will show you this stitch, and then I'm going to go bigger with the camera again. But this is what the stitch looks like on my fabric now. This is the front bit, so they look nice and neat together, and then the back looks a lot less neat, but it's absolutely fine for the purpose that we need for this. So I'm just going a little bit bigger again, because I also just wanted to share with you that I've been commissioned to make a doll. I don't know if I can say yet by who, but once it's out and open, I will tell you who it is. And it just so happened that my grandmother died last Friday. She was very old. Well, she was 94, and it wasn't due to coronavirus or anything like this. She just died of old age, and to be honest, she has been struggling the last 4 years since my mother died, and it's just really hard, I guess, when you've got to bury your own child. It doesn't matter what age you are and what age they are. It's just you always think, oh, it should really be me, not them. That's what I would think, and that's what she thought as well. So I think for her it was a bit of a release. But nevertheless, as with anybody, whatever reason, however old they are and whatever they're dying, it just leaves a bit of a hole. And I'm the oldest grandchild, and she's got 5 grandchildren. No, 4 grandchildren, but of course she's got great grandchildren because I've got children, and my youngest cousins, they've got children now as well. So she there's quite a few generations that were around at some point, and then I suddenly realized, oops, I'm the oldest female of that side of the family now, which seemed really strange. 4 years ago I was the third, and now I'm the oldest, and I don't know, it's just really hit me. And then on the day after I heard of her death, I sat down and I knew how to make a doll, so I made a little doll. And this little doll is very similar to the Hannah's shape, because it's got 2 legs and the body is very similar. It's smaller, a lot smaller. And it's a very, very simple head. In fact, it's the head of the Hannah doll. It's got slightly different hair to everybody else. And the thing about this doll is that I made her in the memory of my grandmother. And so actually sewing a doll has been very therapeutic, and I really loved doing it. And I thought, it took me sort of a good 4 or 5 hours to sew her. And while I was doing it, I just sort of just had a moment of reflection and looked at remembered memories that I had with my grandmother. And so I called her after my grandmother. My grandmother, I also share, I've got her name as my middle name, which has caused huge confusion because she was called Edwina, and because it's a German pronunciation, it's got an E at the end. So it's like Edwin with an E at the end, but it's not a silent E, so you do actually say Edwina. So I called her Edwina doll. And the other thing about it that I should say is that she's entirely made from materials that that are old clothes. So this used to be an old sweater. Her face and arms, hands, is an old T-shirt. It's a really good sort of pinkish color, and I colored in her cheeks with a bit of a crayon, which we can do as well. And then her hat is the sleeve of an old jumper. This is basically the sleeve, and then I've just tied, no, I didn't tie it, but I sewed the top up, so she has a little hat as well, which didn't need sewing at all. And I think sometimes it's just the fact that you can use something that you've got at home, and you don't need to go out and buy expensive materials. And this is, like I say, it's just a sweatshirt that didn't fit my children anymore. No sentimental value on any of these items of clothing, but that's another thought, is that maybe you can use something that you really treasure, but you don't really know what to do because it just sits in your wardrobe, and like a piece of, just a piece of fabric that you don't want to throw away, but at the same time you don't really know what to do with it, and you want to keep it. So turning it into something like that is really nice. I didn't have anything that belonged to my grandmother, but I just had enough stuff to make little Edwina doll, and she's really sweet. I'm really pleased with her. She's turned out quite lovely, and my sister saw her and she said, "Oh, I want an Edwina doll, so I've got to make another one so we can have one each." Anyway, that's just beside the point. Whilst you are sewing your tube, hopefully, I'm just checking. Oh, there's so many people, and I think this is one of the things that we will remember. Lots of people have lost loved ones, and like I say, it doesn't matter what age, it doesn't matter what your relationship was to them. They leave whole. It's just, and you can't say, oh, my loss is worse than yours, or your loss is worse than mine. I think in general, I'm grateful that my grandmother lived to such an old age, and I'm also very relieved that she is now with my mum again. So that's something to be joyful about. But of course, when we're left behind, and it sort of sinks in, because it kind of it disturbs the constellation of the family and where you're at now, and well, that family member is no longer there, and then you realize you're moving up the ladder, and yeah, it just brings home our own mortality, and how one day we'll be the oldest. Well, I already am, and then you'll be gone too. But yeah, let's just stay a lot more cheerful, because you can make dolls obviously also for the opposite end of the scale, where you make dolls for children. Though I will say, I have had lovely stories from people who have made dolls for the elderly, and especially when they're soft and tactile, and they can squeeze them, and they can cuddle them, and I think that's really nice too. So I'm sewing my tube while I'm chatting, and I hope you're doing the same. Is anybody doing this while I'm doing this? Hi Steffi, I'm working on video with 2 cheats. They have both done the seam on the sewing machine. Oh, I don't mind. That's great. Do the seam on the sewing machine. It's brilliant. I would probably too if I was friends with with the sewing machine. I haven't even got one, and I don't feel tempted in the slightest to have one either. I just love if I'm sewing by hand. I love doing that. But if you have a sewing machine, yeah, go for it. You can cut out so much work, and there's no right or wrong. You don't have to sew this by hand. There's lots of hand sewing that you can't do with a sewing machine in total anyway. So when you come to put features on the face, if you're embroidering it, you can't use the sewing machine. So there's lots of hand work in there anyway. Yes, go for it. So I'm just slowly but surely closing the seam up, and reading some of the comments at the same time. Yeah, memory doll, that's the word. Thank you, Pamela. I hadn't thought of Pamela just suggests to call it a memory doll. That's what she is. She's a memory doll. And it's hard to explain. Once you start making a doll for somebody or for a purpose, a little bit of that reason just gets sewn into it. It's not visible, but it's there, and you just know that a little bit of yourself, or a little bit of the memory, or a little bit of that suddenly that doll has already got a purpose, even though it's brand new. And sometimes the purpose changes too. I've had this too, where you make a doll and you make it for somebody else, and then you can't part from it, or you've made it for yourself and then you suddenly know it's not your doll, it's for somebody else. So there is a transformation, and sometimes takes place, but in the here and now, as you're sewing the doll, it is very therapeutic. It also feels really lovely if you can use materials that you already have got, or if you are designing the doll, to suit somebody who you know. So you could make the color of the eyes in that color. I just feel really self-conscious because if anybody sees me sewing now, I'm such a yeah, it's gone a bit weird. So my seams, it's all happening, but it's not the neatest job I've done in my life, and that's okay. So now what I'm doing is I'm actually cutting a little bit of a corner here. I've got enough thread left, and I'm going to leave my needle even in there. You don't have to do this, but you can. And I'm just going to go a little bit closer up again. So what I've got here now is my sewn up tube, and if you wanted to, you could put a blanket stitch around the edge just to secure the edge, but I don't think it's necessary because the back of the head is entirely covered and held together anyway, so I'm not going to do that. But what I am doing is, and you should do that too, you need to turn it inside out. And I have left the sewing thread on there for a purpose. So now you've got a tube, and now comes the moment to see whether it fits your head, basically, well, the doll's head. And it does need to be a snug fit. So if you've left your sewing thread on there like I did, that needs to be at the top of the doll now. So you need to slip it on. Again, you do this a bit like putting a sock on you by slipping the tube so that the back of the back of the head has the seam now. So this is the back of the head and this is the front, and you're pulling it right down so that what you end up with is a similar sort of sausage end as the white tube underneath it. And then you basically need another bit of your extra strong thread. You could sew this at the bottom, but if you have extra strong thread, then just tie it around the base. So here you need to be mindful that you tie it as neat as you can. I'm leaving the top open of that tube at the moment because then I can tuck it a little bit closer to the face. So the idea is that you keep it so that there is that there are as few creases in the front as possible. Have your creases at the back if they occur naturally, but keep it crease free at the front, and then tie it as tight as you can. Put a knot onto there. You could even go round it again just to make sure it's nice and tight. You definitely don't want that to pop open at any point. And tying this with a double, oop, didn't tie that at all then. Okay, going round it again, tying it again there, and then put a knot on it. And cut the thread off now. Doesn't have to be so close to the knot, you don't want that to come open. And so now you've got your head tight at the base, but still open at the top. And you have an opportunity to pull this tube nice and tight over the head now. If the tube is too loose and you can see creases on the face, then you just sew another seam further in alongside the one that you've already sewn. And now the idea is that you are going to fold this top. I'm turning this around so you can see it. I'm folding this top part away. There is no particular trick of how to sew this on, but I'm pulling it away from the face. Can you see how I'm doing that? Folding it over the back, because remember the back is completely covered up. And now I'm going to use this little bit of end thread, but if you need to thread a new one, better still. And I'm folding in the open flap so that I am literally stitching this on. So I've got a nice neat area here. And I'm starting, and this is an invisible stitch that I'm using. So I'm going into the fabric like that. This is just the head fabric, and then I'm going into the top fabric in exactly the same way, and I'm pulling it nice and tight. So I'm tucking that open fabric out of the way. And I'm going to have to rethread my needle. There's no two ways about it. But once you've made secured it at the back of the head, then you can work your way around it. The main thing is, it doesn't really matter, even if the back of the head looks absolutely terrible, as long as it's just on the back of the head and you do not have anything on the front of the head, then it's just your well-kept secret. So don't panic at this stage if it's not looking very neat. What I'm doing, you can see that I'm pulling away from the face with every stitch that I'm doing. I'm always pulling towards the back, so I'm trying to keep the face as smooth and as big as I can without having any seams on there. So I'm doing my invisible stitch. It's another way to tighten the front of the fabric as well, because you can be sort of quite generous in how you pull this together and cover it. Yeah, that's another way of sort of covering, making the cover of the face neat. And always pulling away from the face, so keep that face area nice and smooth. We don't want anything to show there. And in a minute I'm going to have to rethread my needle. There we go. That's it. I'm going to get rid of that thread now. And whenever you have to get rid of your thread, do it all on the back of the head. So start off so that you don't have the any extra ends of thread or anything like that showing on the side. And I just show you what it looks like. So I've done from the middle of the back of the head, I've gone towards the front. I've still got an open flap on this side, but I have kept it away from the head as much as I can. So if you look at it that way and I cover just that, you can see that you can't see any of the fabric opening, so it looks completely covered. And that's really important. So I'm going to thread my needle again. And sew the other side up. Keep a double. Just getting started here. I don't tend to put a knot on the back on my thread. It's just I found it's too fiddly. If I just go round and round a couple of times, it sort of secure itself. And do the invisible stitch. But I promise you, even if you just sew it any old way, it really doesn't matter. If this is your first doll, just build your confidence up that you can actually do it. And I'm pulling the fabric as I'm putting the stitches in. That makes the front of the, it's quite a substantial pull if you can see it here. So I mean, obviously don't pull too hard so you tear the thread off, but give it a good old tuck and keep it from the front of the face, so always pulling towards the back of the head. And keep it really taut. Keep the fabric taut. Don't worry if it looks like an amateurish stitch. It's not. You're not doing plastic surgery here. You're just literally getting rid of that open top of the tube that you've sewn. Keep it away from the face. Pull it back. There. And even if you go over it again, that will still help you to make the cover of the face tighter by putting another stitch over the top. Always pulling, keeping it nice and taut. And don't know how everybody's getting on with this, but I'm getting to the end of the opening here, so I'm literally just going over it again, and then I'm tidying my thread away, and then I'm done with that part of the head. There we go. That's all. How is everybody keeping up? How is the speed for everybody? Am I going too fast? Not fast enough? Not clear enough? You can't see enough? Just give me any kind of feedback. I'm really open to hear what your views are, because this is the first time I'm doing a sew along tutorial, and I'm hoping to do more. There are in fact some on the schedule already. We're going to do some doll's house dolls, and we're just working out the materials for that. So that's a similar one where you can get your pack pre-ordered and then just join and sew a small doll. In fact, we're wanting to do key workers, so we're at the moment looking at nurses and doctors and trying to make sure that we get the right clothing for that. So I'm getting rid of my thread now. That's it. I'll show you the back of the head here. So this is the back of the head. I've pulled the tube over the front. There's my face. So can you see that even though it was quite a big nose that I put on there, it's actually become a lot smaller. So this is the bottom of it. So this is the top of the head. This is the back of the head. All tidied away. The face is pretty clear, left clear, and that is takes us to the first part of our tutorial, finishing off with the head. And I'm going to read some of the comments here now. Oh, lots of people sort of understanding this thing of making something to memorize a person that's no longer with you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Very kind words. Oh, thank you, Kathy. Edwina doll is lovely. And it's quite right, Donna. Edwina has already brought me comfort just by the fact that I was making her and was thinking of my grandmother. Yeah, and my mum's not just smiling, my mum's probably laughing her socks off. She was a terrible sewer. In fact, she was a great knitter, but when she, it was the sewing up of the knitted garments that it just spoiled it entirely. I think I probably did a bit better with the sewing part of everything, but not that much better. Hi, Faith. And Donna is sewing along, great. Faith, hi Steffi, sorry I'm late. Well, I'm really sorry you're late too, but for your sake, not for my sake. You've given me the idea of making a doll from a dressing gown that was my mum's. Oh, that's nice, Jane. I might end up making one for my sister, my daughter Claire, who you know, and little Charlotte. Oh, 3 generations. I know this is, I've got a photo where my grandmother is on it, my mother, I am on it, and my oldest daughter, and it's literally four generations of the oldest, and they're all the oldest girls as well. So yeah, I've got that photo, and I have to dig it out. It's somewhere on one of my laptops, and I will share it, and then you can see. And 2 of them are gone now, so there's only 2 generations around now. Instant facelift, yes. It's perfect. That's it. So great. We would all have a memory of my mum, who we lost a number of years ago. Yeah, that's a really nice thing. And then it just feels really special, and you could choose the hair, or maybe even certainly the skin color and some little touch. And I also know people that sew a little heart inside all of their dolls, so you can do that too. I want, or maybe something special, put something inside the doll that used to belong to her. And it cannot be underestimated how much it will help you to heal, to process things, to let your mind wander off, because you have to sit still to do this, and because you're sitting still, all kinds of thoughts pop into your head. And I always imagine with every stitch that I do, there's a little bit of that thought is caught in it, and so it never goes away, and all the memories are in that doll as well. So we would all have a memory. That's right, Kathy. Is this the top? This is the top where it's been sewn up. That's right. That's the back of the head and also the top. The bottom of the head is where it looks like a balloon, bottom of a balloon. That's the bottom of the head. So that is the bit that eventually sits inside the body. So you can see the comparison of the two side by side there. That's it. And this face is actually a lot firmer than this one. So but again, it's not, there is no right or wrong. If you can get it nice and tight, then that's great. But if it's softer, that's fine too, as long as it's not wrinkly. But you can make it unwrinkly by having that tube really nice and tight over the head. So that's the head for the doll done. Looking lovely, Steffi, got to go, so we'll catch you later. Face, I want to make one to represent my son, who would be 22 now. Oh, I have many keepsakes, but it's all hidden away in a box, so this will be something I can actually hold and see. Oh, sorry, feeling really deep breaths. I can't imagine what that's like when you, it's one thing saying goodbye to your mother or your grandmother, but don't even want to go there. Thank you, Faith, for sharing that. 22 years now. Thank you for teaching all this. I would no idea where to start without you. Oh, thank you, Faith. I love doing it. So thank you for telling your stories. It's really lovely to hear. I've heard so many stories about doll making. There's something about dolls. I know people do teddies and all kinds of other things, but there's something about dolls because they represent humans, basically. And I have I've heard so many stories, and some of them I do mention in the book, because it's the reason why I wrote the book. And dolls are not just for children. Dolls are sometimes just for you. You have to make a doll because it means something to you, because you've lost somebody or something in your life, and it's a way of holding on to that memory. And it's like I mentioned at the book launch not so long ago, there are people, women in hospital, in prison actually, and they make tiny little dolls, and they keep them in their pocket because they're the babies that they're not allowed to have with them and while they're in prison. And for some reason, the lady who makes these dolls with these women as a part of their therapy, all the dolls always have to have something shiny on them, which I think is just, you know, where's that coming from? Why does it have to be shiny? Is it because it's precious and shininess resembles preciousness? So, and they have them, they're big enough to fit in their pocket. And I know stories of where little dolls have been made for little children who get bullied at school, and they just squeeze the doll in their pocket and they just know that they're loved. People in care homes, people who suffer from dementia, little squishy dolls is just, you know how they do these tactile things for people anyway, forgotten what they're called now, but anyway, where they've got buttons and ribbons and all kinds of things so that they can twiddle, are they twiddle bags or something like that? Anyway, a doll is a little bit like that, but also it's got that human aspect. And there are some people who really don't like dolls, and I understand not everybody needs to make a doll in this whole wide world. But I think making a doll, if you can make a doll and you put that love inside, that you're, or just the, because you're sitting still, it's really, you're not going to feel angry while you're doing it, because you're sitting still and you have to concentrate, and it just calms you down. Something magical gets put inside that doll as you're sitting there and you're thinking and you're creating. And I have got, I think I've still got old here somewhere. I mentioned him. Oh, he's fallen out of the box. I'm just going to go get him. Oh God, I'm going to fall off this chair in a minute as well. Hang on a second. Oh, come on, Peter. There he is. He was the doll that my grandmother made for my dad. And my dad is the youngest in the family, and then my cousins on my father's side, my cousins, they are all older than me, and they all played with him. And then I stayed at my grandparents' house when I was a child, and he just came home with me. But I don't think I was meant to take him home, because I think at some point people said, does anybody know where Peter Pippi is? And I kept very quiet, and I live a long way away, so they can't go and get him. But this is Peter Pippi, who he's now over over 70 years old, I guess, and he was made from what my grandmother had at hand at home. So after the war, not very much, I guess. It's the original hat. He's been mended a few times. He used to have a bead nose, and I had to improvise. Yeah, his face has been sewn up a lot, and he's lost an eyebrow, and he's quite funny actually. He's lost his head a couple of times, so I think I sewed it on when I was a child, and you can tell. But I absolutely loved him, and he's been passed down to my son, who loves him too, though I'm not allowed to say that because my son's 18. So yes, that's basically all we're doing today in terms of hands-on, but I'm going to give you homework. And the homework is you all have got the pattern, which I sent to you, or if you've got the book, then obviously it's in there. This is the pattern for the body, okay? And you're going to cut, that's your homework, you're going to cut the pattern out from your piece of velour. Now I'm using sunshine yellow because it's such a beautiful color. And you've got a massive piece there, so you've got lots to use for your shapes. And the way to do it, obviously, you cut around the template, and then you lay the template onto your piece of fabric. I don't need to tell you this, but you're cutting out the larger part for the body, the smaller part of the body, but you need to leave space for the hat, which is here, okay? So it's best if you have all three, cut the shape out, lay it all out on your piece of fabric. I promise you, you're not going to run out of fabric as long as you are sensible the way that you're laying it out. And these are also the size of fabric that we sell. If you ever want to make a doll, you see how much you're actually getting. It's quite a large piece. This is exactly what, when we say a fat quarter, that's what it looks like. But you have plenty of fabric there. Look, even just laying it out lengthwise, I've still got all this here at the base. So even just laying it out side by side, the whole length of the fabric, you can cut the shapes out. So you will have plenty of fabric. This velour is super soft. It's 80% cotton and 20% man-made fiber. It's quite hard to get such a high cotton content fabric. I wish it was 100% cotton, but I don't even think they do that. It has to have a little bit of stretch because you want to stuff it, and you want the fabric to stretch out a little bit. But this is your job is to basically cut this out and have it ready to sew. And I'm just going to look up what we're doing next time. So just bear with me a second. I'm just going to look this up on my phone now because I can't quite remember what the exact wording is, what we're doing next. So just bear with me. I'm doing this now. Just have to have a little think so I can tell you exactly what's happening next. In fact, it's tomorrow. Not next. I nearly said next week, but it's not. It's tomorrow. So today we have we started by making the head and add a face if applicable. So basically the face I've decided we leave until the very end, because once it's on the doll, because we're not embroidering the face, okay? So this little face here is needle felted. If you do want to embroider the face, then you have to do this before we put the hat on. It doesn't have to happen now, but we have to do this before you put the hat on. To needle felt the face, we can do this at the very end or at any point. If you want to embroider the face and you want to do it already, then you need to go in from the back of the head and bring your needle through and put eyes and mouth on there. You don't need, for those who are sewing along with the pack that we have provided you, you don't have to do this now. This is just for those who are watching the video later, and you could at this point put the face on. Because you're needle felting it, we can do this at the very end. But if you're embroidering it, it needs to happen before the hat goes on. What I would like you to do is, when you're at home, is to put the hair onto there. And I'll show you how to do this now, but you don't need to do this now. You can do this at home, because this will be something that we can then take forward tomorrow. So tomorrow we are going to finish off the head, and I've said cut the fabric and prepare to sew together. You can already cut the fabric. That would be really helpful if you did it, but I will show you tomorrow how to cut it as well. But as I've just laid it out for you, you can already cut it and have it ready just to cut out a step, and then we look at the head tomorrow together again. But you can embroider the hair onto there already as well. So to embroider the hair, you need embroidery thread, which has been put into your pack if you've got it. And I'm using this lovely brown. In fact, we could do this tomorrow together. But I'll show you how to do this, and then maybe we do it again tomorrow if you want to do it during the hour. So you cut off a manageable length, and you put this onto your sewing needle. And I'm using this thread. It's a 6-ply thread. I'm using it as a whole piece. Now you have to sort of imagine now that we're sewing a little fringe onto there like that. You have to imagine that it's going to look really ugly at the back, because we're not going all the way down the back. We're actually only putting it on at the front. So again, I'm just securing my thread where nobody will see later on what's happening. And I'm just going to do a couple of strands, and then I'll pick this up tomorrow. So I'm going in where the first strand, where I want it to be visible by the side of top part side of the head. And this is the front of my doll, as I'm trying to have the strand going across the front, I'm doing my first stitch here. So you're doing really long stitches, which resembles the hair. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it a bit closer up. So I'm starting my thread here at the top, and then I'm doing my first strand of hair by the side of the head. And then I'm not so much worried what happens up here, because the hat will reach to there. So you will only see part of what you're sewing on. And so it's quite random actually, however you want to sew the hair on. Just keep going along the face. And you might need to rethread that as well. Can you see how I'm doing that? So the hat will sit on top of there. So that's all you will be seeing. But that is something that you could be doing at home if you wanted to work ahead. You could also be cutting the fabric out already, and then tomorrow I'm just going big again so you can see me again. And then tomorrow we're just going to look how we're sewing up the fabric. That's going to be your project for the weekend, making the whole body shape so that you're sewing it up. It's literally just sewing. It's going to be so boring if we're going to do this together here. And then on Monday we will stuff the doll and put the head on, and then you're done. So I'm just going to look at the comments again in case I'm missing anything. We could all have a memo. Oh no, I've read that already, sorry. I've been there. Thank you for teaching all. Yes, I've done all of that. Oh, that's a lovely thought, to catch a memory in the stitching. What a heartfelt sentiment. Well, this is how I always imagine when I stitch my dolls, that with every stitch a little bit of love is sewn into it. And in fact, that's how I've decided to sign my books. This one isn't signed, but it just says, let's sew some love. And on that note, I will leave you and love you. So take care, everybody. Send me a photo of how far you have got with the doll, and then tomorrow I'll try and work out how to show it on the screen. And if you have any questions, message me and I will do my very best to answer them. And if I can't answer them there and then I'll do it tomorrow, so that you get the support that you need to make your maybe very first doll ever. So take care, enjoy the rest of the day, do a little bit of homework if you wish, but otherwise we'll do it all again tomorrow, and yeah, catch up with you then. Thank you very much for watching, and hope you're all safe and happy, and we see you tomorrow. Bye.